welcome to the podcast. My name's Greg. Today, our special guest is my partner, Slam.
Hello.
Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about mental health, specifically living with somebody who has mental health issues or just, I guess, mood cycling and depression in general. So it's something we both struggle with. That would be a very good and relevant conversation for us.
Indeed.
So I guess I'll start it off with, would you mind telling everybody what you are diagnosed with?
Sure. I am diagnosed with bipolar disorder type 2, which thankfully is the lesser of the two. Bipolar 1 is definitely one who'd go a little bit crazier than I am, but I do still deal with mood cycling and that ranging from agitation to just a very depressive mood. So, yeah.
I would say you're one of the more unlucky ones when it comes to bipolar 2, in that most of your more manic episodes tend to be much more like angry and unenjoyable. I think there's a general stigma that bipolar 2, like mania, is just this really, really good high feeling of just power and like energy that's just almost unending. And I feel like you always just get really angry.
Yeah, it was especially bad. I remember clearly, like this rage that I felt because of it was like some news article about anti-maskers, and that just like set me off for whatever reason, like just irrationally angry. And it was at that moment I was like, I probably need a bit more meds.
Okay, so you're mentioning anti-masking. Obviously, that's a more recent time event. When were you officially diagnosed? And when you look back on your life, when do you think you started having symptoms?
I was officially diagnosed over the summer. Um,
2020?
Summer of 2020, yes. But I would say that I've been feeling the effects of being bipolar all the way back to high school. I definitely made some irrational mania decisions that at the time I felt were valid and what I like should do, what I could do. But it turned out to be like things that just kind of bit me in the ass later on.
So I guess that's a really good thing to, like, a good kind of point to start off on. And for anyone that doesn't know, things like bipolar do tend to emerge sort of like late teens, like late adolescence. The closer you get to sort of like 18, like 17, 18 into your early 20s is generally when people start really getting diagnosed with bipolar. In fact, it's actually really difficult to diagnose children like with bipolar. They try not to do that until you are more past your more like turbulent adolescence. So,
Mhm.
but you go all the way back into that high school time, so that's got to be a little bit frustrating. Is there anything else that you are diagnosed with and or that is comorbid with your bipolar?
Yes, I have ADHD as well, which is very pretty common. I think it's like over 30% of the people who have bipolar disorder also have like ADHD, and I'm medicated for both.
Is that something that you felt like you were also suffering with from a young age?
Absolutely. That one goes all the way back to my elementary school days, where the teacher was basically telling my parents, like, "Look, we need to put this kid on like Ritalin or something like that in order to get him to calm down and focus on his studies." Um, at the time, my parents felt that it was because I was just a young kid and I was really smart, so I'd get everything done and then just kind of mess around with the kids while like I didn't have to do any of my work. As we learn now, that teacher was more than likely correct, and that I definitely needed at least some sort of like therapy. Maybe not necessarily like medication, but at least some like proper tools to like address like when I'm feeling like ADHD.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like that's like a pretty common story when it comes to people just being really intelligent and really smart, like on the ball when they're kids. So a lot of parents who maybe aren't as knowledgeable, and no disrespect to themselves, just don't know a lot more about ADHD and maybe don't have the time like for a psychiatrist to explain it to them, that even though your child is actually very smart and very capable, that sometimes they just need their brain almost to slow down for them to even be more incredible. And it's really, I think, seen as like doctors trying to like pump your kids full of like
Prescription medications.
amphetamines and
Yeah.
yeah, like unnecessarily, and just big pharma. But the reality is the stigma against ADHD is so strong. I feel like we actually are really underdiagnosing a lot of cases, or you're having parents push back in a lot of cases, which would really benefit from medication. Obviously, yours is a good example of this.
Definitely.
So when it comes to bipolar, I do want to address is like my own perspective here, which is I'm kind of cycling not specified right now because I'm somewhere between cyclothymic and bipolar type 2.
Hmm.
I just recently went on a medication. I went on Lamictal, and I had a huge manic spike with it. Not to scare anyone who's never tried Lamictal, it's a very, very rare side effect. I'm just really lucky that way, or unlucky, depending how you think about it.
Hmm.
And we just had a pretty tumultuous time between the two of us with that episode. And I would say, while I've been hypomanic before, I think you'll agree with me. I've never quite been that bad, at least in the last 3 or 4 years, right?
Yes, I fully agree. What might be seem as like minor, like sort of irritations, explode out of control, and it's this is something that I've gone through as well. I mean, just as I mentioned about like just an article about anti-maskers set me off, and a similar idea of like being set off due to minor inconveniences was very prevalent lately.
It was interesting because you got diagnosed out of my own noticing because my degree is in psychology, as like my background, and I noticed that you were having like a really bad time
Hmm.
with depression, and then you went on to Zoloft, which obviously caused you to be manic, and then they treated you for that. But I've been with you the whole time. You've gone on from no medication to 4 medications.
Hmm.
And I've definitely firsthand experienced your hypomania and your irritation. And I can honestly tell you it is really weird seeing it on both sides. I don't know
Hmm.
if you had that experience too when I was lashing out, but it definitely made things feel like it made way more sense when you and I used to fight last year.
Yeah, it was like I had a lot of sympathy for you when you were going through it, because that sort of like unbridled and uncontrolled rage, like
It's
something that
not
really
even rage. It's like
was like
it's
agitation, you were saying.
yeah, because Lamictal makes it so I don't feel like depressed, anxious, or angry. But I also don't feel any like guilt or remorse really for what I've done. Again, I was like hypomanic, so that's
Hmm.
not really just Lamictal. But Lamictal definitely fixed my depression anxiety situation. I felt none of that. However, you'd be talking or we'd be talking or something would happen and I would just, you know what? Like that absolutely like happened.
Hmm.
And you used to do it too here and there. And it was I don't know if you felt this way too, but it's almost like I can feel myself being the asshole and I somehow couldn't stop it.
For me, I never felt like I was being an asshole. For me, it's just like you're justified because of this region, but
Mm.
they typically, after like looking back on it, are like fallacies, so to speak. It's like, yeah, it's only you, you're kind of messing things up, man. You gotta chill out.
I guess that's interesting too. I know, like, no mania, like, no manic episode is the same for anybody. No hypomanic episode is the same for everybody, which is one of those reasons why bipolar is so incredibly hard to treat and to work on, and why there's just so many medications that do and don't work for so many people. For example, the medication I just tried that caused a hypomanic episode, you are on and have been on for quite a while now.
Indeed,
And the
where
worst thing that happened to you was dry mouth and nausea.
it's true. Yeah, for me, it worked very well for controlling that agitation that we've been talking about, and it kind of like lowered the hypomanic mood quite dramatically. I'm also on Abilify, which is an antipsychotic, and benchtropine as well, as another like kind of anti-anxiety, and I forget the name, but it blocks one of the neuroreceptors as well, and
It's what is it?
it
Is it
begins with an A.
serotonin based? No, it's not serotonin based. It's the
Mm-mm.
other. It's the other one. Oh God, I can't remember right now.
Yeah, I don't remember either. But regardless, it's been working wonders for me.
It
Like
really does work wonders for you.
yeah, for controlling the anxiety, controlling like I feel like a wide array of emotions constantly, and it just feels overwhelming at times. And so it's always difficult to like hear like how like what are you feeling right now? It's just like I feel everything and nothing at the same time. So I'm just kind of in a freak out mood, and I just need to you know ground myself in something. And like I said, medications have been a huge help for that.
For sure, for sure. I have a harder time getting medications because I'm already on a lot of my other things for my lupus and my Ehlers-Danlos and my POTS and all the rest of it. So whatever I take as a mental health medication has to play nicely with everything else.
Hmm.
And when you start being on a lot of meds for those kinds of things, you start having risks for like QTC prolongation, which is basically like the like the beats between your heart would become too far apart and you would go into cardiac arrest. So obviously we're a little concerned about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I am so jealous that Lamictal works so well for you because what you described is like the exact opposite of what it did for me. It like helped your mania and your agitation, and I'd never been more like, what did I call it? Like angry vrooming. Like I just felt
Hmm.
like I could just go 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 and do everything, and like nothing felt bad. I was super social. I was super inclined to do things. I was super inclined to like clean and work out and do all these things, and I'm like a really like physically disabled. Like
Hmm.
I don't know where it came from. But yeah, it's very jealous. Yeah. But we have been in, like through the ringer, I would say, as like couples. We went to a little bit of couples therapy, and with my degree in psychology too, and I think your own therapist too when you were seeing your guy Greg for a while.
Hmm.
Sorry, I almost called him Glenn. I'm like, that's my therapist.
It's okay.
When you were seeing Greg for a while, I know you guys talked about me and like what you the specifics of that is obviously your own. Like I don't need to know, but I know that we've done a lot of work independently and together in terms of like communication and like this relationship. I don't think most people advise people who are both bipolar to date each other. And I do want to just kind of like put it out there that neither of us knew we were like mood cycling before we got
Yes,
together.
there was a lot of work involved before getting to that point.
We had been together for like at least 2 years before you were diagnosed.
Yes.
And then I always thought I just had PMDD, which like ironically is generally treated with like SSRIs and mood stabilizers. But I had been on and off medications for a really long time, and I always just thought it was depression, which I learned later, actually like within the last year or 2 years, that if you tend to take SSRIs and you have like a manic episode or a mixed episode, it's actually a really good inclination that you are in fact bipolar,
Mm.
which suddenly made my last like 4 SSRI adventures make a lot of sense. So it's really complicated. Sometimes you think you have one diagnosis and you really have something else. Mental health is really interconnected. So I guess I was just going to say, I hope anybody who's listening to this and feels like they have questions about what they could possibly have, I hope you see a psychiatrist. But I'm tangenting.
Yeah.
I was gonna say in terms of us working like together, and obviously like you are a partner with someone who is in the middle of getting treatment for bipolar, and I know I'm not your average patient person because it's my degree. But what would be advice that you would give essentially?
What advice I would give to a layperson? Well, first and foremost, I would say pay attention to your moods. Pay attention to like how you react to things because that those sorts of reactions, if it's like different from like a day to day sort of thing, definitely shows like where your mindset is at. Like for me, like a normal day, I see an anti-mask article, I'll just like pass over it, like whatever. Like I don't like it doesn't really affect me. I'll be telling people who are around me like they better be wearing masks, but like aside from that, it's nothing. But like that same sort of thing causing like an agitation to the point where you like have like this like you want to like scream and yell, that definitely is a huge indicator, right, that you are cycling through moods. And so like keeping track of like your emotions through like a day-to-day sort of thing is definitely super beneficial. Many people who regarding bipolar suggest having like a mood journal, writing down like things that you need to writing down the things that you're feeling and how they make you feel and things that might be affecting you and all that good stuff. So I personally have a bipolar workbook. That's the one by Monica Ramirez Basco that I picked up from Amazon, and that's been a huge it's been a huge help. And it's
Not
very
sponsored, but could be sponsored.
yeah.
Amazon, hit us up.
Yeah, Dr. Vasco, hook us up, please. Or Amazon.
I am 100% going to second the mood journaling, and I'm definitely going to second the concept of doing cognitive behavioral therapy in the form of workbooks at home. I think there's a lot to gain and learn, and I think even reading about your condition or other similar conditions can really help you. Sometimes a lot of conditions look like each other,
Hmm.
and a lot of past experiences can really shape the way that your situation unfolds. So, like for me, I've always really been more depressed than I've been manic. In fact, to the point where I figured that my 4 or 5 days worth of productivity were just regular people feeling that way,
Yeah.
which is really common with like really more depressed centered like bipolar sort of stuff, or when people get diagnosed with cyclothymia, is you actually for the longest time think you actually have depression. But you just have like glances basically of feeling okay and normal. But the reality is, if those okay or normal periods are filled with this, or just filled with immense productivity, like a lack of sleep, higher maybe sexual inclinations, maybe you spend a bit more money, just feeling like in a much better mood, like maybe abnormally, that is probably not just you feeling like a normal person. It's probably you having like a mildly hypomanic episode. And you probably should be talking to a doctor about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Another kind of tell with bipolar disorder is the idea of like you not really needing sleep when
Oh, God.
when you're like hypomanic. Like for me, for example, I there was one time I was just playing video games for almost like 24 hours straight over the weekend, and I fell asleep for like 3 hours on Sunday. Woke up and I was completely fine, and I wanted to like keep doing more, and that is obviously not sustainable and obviously not like what you want to do. So, while it is obvious, like kind of looking back, those sorts of moments I didn't really like attribute to like being like an illness.
You figured it out by the next morning, though. You were good about that one. I remember that one really distinctly.
Yeah, it was one of those things where you're just like, okay, well, like that was not normal, and that is a very clear cut example of what hypomania is looks like.
Your bipolar is also way worse than mine. Your highs for mania are way worse than my natural highs. Again, my most recent episode was medication induced, so I don't really count that as like what my natural cycle is.
Sure.
But I would say like hypomania can honestly be as simple as going from needing like 8 to 10 hours a night to having a couple of hours where you sleep maybe like a broken sleep for 3 or 4 hours and you get up still feeling really energized and not sore.
Hmm.
Like sometimes that happens and it's really small. And we're not talking about like the one off time where you sleep for 3 hours and you're fine. We're talking about like if you find a pattern that every couple of months, like you hit this peak or for 3 or 4 days at a time kind of situation, or maybe a week or two at a time, you just suddenly need like an obnoxiously less amount of sleep.
Yeah, that's a warning sign.
And then it returns like back to normal. That's it. The journaling is really nice because a lot of the times you don't even realize if you aren't really good with DBT or CBT yet, that which is dialectical behavioral therapy and cognitive behavioral therapy. Sometimes it's hard to scan your own thoughts. Like we mentioned, like Slam, you have a really hard time with like, and how does that make you feel?
Yes.
But if you're journaling kind of like what's happening to you and kind of like the best of your ability, what you're feeling, when you go back a day or two later, you can kind of connect the dots. And we're
Right.
talking about depression or anxiety or bipolar, it can be good to recognize like patterns that way. And it keeps a log for you.
Right.
I think that the best thing I can say for like a couple with bipolar that we learned would probably be like you struggle with it still, and I do sometimes too, but it's mostly because I'm stubborn. But being able to say like, I don't want to talk to you right now. I'm gonna go take 5 or 10 minutes, and then we can continue talking then. Like recognizing that you're really overwhelmed, and then coming back together after you've cooled off has really been good for us.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's one of those things where you're battling against your own brain. So like you're just as smart as the other part of you that's like, no, we feel justified in how we're feeling, and we're going to yell and scream and make sure we get our point across. So it's exceptionally difficult to be able to like take that mindset and then be like, all right, let's take a step back and let's approach this with logic, you know. But
But
it's
you can't do it in the moment. You just cannot.
yes, it's yeah, absolutely.
We've had arguments for sure where I was like, again, yours is a bit worse than mine, where I was literally trying to explain like a really basic concept to you. And I had been trying to explain it to you for like 15 minutes, like solid, and you just were not getting it. And you were really like upset with me. And I made you take that 10-minute time out. And when you came back, I explained it to you again, and it was just like, it just clicked.
Hmm.
And I was like, where was that 15 minutes ago? Like, where was, like, but you were just too upset. And I think
Yeah,
that was a good, like, learning moment that, like, you really just do get too upset.
sure.
Um, Not that I'm encouraging, like, accepting, like, domestic abuse or violence in the form of emotional abuse. Like, that's not what I'm saying. But I think too, when you have more of a like hypomanic type episode, one, I've learned what the signs are for you, and two, it means when you do lash out with combination with all the other signs, I can kind of tell like what's going on.
Yeah,
Again, it's not like a long term treatment that I think I would like tell anyone to suck up, and I think that you and I have real conversations afterwards about like that was really uncool that you said that, and you apologize, and we move on. It's a super rare occasion. Again, I'm not trying to like throw you under. But I think like a good partnership with bipolar means understanding that your partner is going to have moments where they say shit they don't mean.
absolutely.
I said some really fucked up shit this past week that I feel really bad about now. But at the time, I just like I basically told you like I recognize that I probably shouldn't have said that, but I don't actually give a fuck,
Yeah,
and I'm not sorry about it. But I recognize I should be, which is really fucked up. But like I think that's important if you know you're hypomanic, even if maybe you can't say like I feel bad about what I did, but being like I recognize that what I did isn't appropriate and like I am sorry for that. And then later coming back together.
for sure. And a recommendation for people who may not necessarily like can look back, I think finding like, this is really good with the workbook that I mentioned earlier. There's a lot of examples of people who have had like real life experiences with bipolar, and a lot of those like really clicked for me. From like feeling that overwhelmed sense of emotions to not having like the regret or remorse that Gray was talking about. Um, we yeah, it's a learning experience. It feels like it's a pretty uphill battle, but like I said, finding other examples of other people going through the same thing definitely gives you strength and gives you like the perspective to realize that like, look, this is an illness that is affecting not just you but other people, and everybody can kind of come together to really like share their experiences and see like find commonality, which makes life a little easier for somebody with bipolar, because it's like, oh, okay, like when this happens, not only has it been happened before, but there are steps that I can take to kind of rectify it.
Yeah, and I think in that same vein, like really learning what your particular symptoms are is really important. You and I both have this like mad food bug ordering craze that happens where we're like, I'm just going to order 4 days in a row, like maybe twice a day. World's my oyster.
Seriously.
Or like in particular, like for me, it's almost like I come out of kind of being really sad. It's like I feel kind of okay. Huh, it's been 2 or 3 days of feeling okay. Huh, I cleaned my entire house. Huh, I haven't been sleeping well for the last like 2 or 3 days, but I feel fine. Oh God, I
Hmm.
feel fine. Oh no. And then I
Right.
kind of like I clue in, I click in. And for you to like I can generally tell when you are getting obviously more agitated or when you're being a bit shorter or maybe when you're can I share the story about you and your doctor's appointment most recently?
Um. Yeah, that's fine.
We had talked about you being in a really dark place, like just chronically in a dark place still regardless of your meds. And we had made a plan that you would talk to your psychiatrist, your PA, about potentially switching off one of your main meds for something else, like either Abilify or Lamictal, like just changing out something or adding something in like an SSRI, but you're already on so much. And we talked about that for 2 days, I think it was. And then the day for you to go to your appointment came, and you were suddenly like, no, I'm not depressed. This is just my life sucks right now. I'm fine. And you went to your doctor and you were like, I don't need to change my meds. Everything's good. And then you came back home and we talked about it. And I was like, okay, what did she put you on? And you're like, nothing. I told her I was fine because I don't think I'm actually depressed. I just think it's like all in my head. I think like,
Yeah.
I can do it this time. I can like willpower my way through the depression. I'm just going to make my life better. And I just looked at you and I was just like, ah! What does this sound like to you?
Yeah.
You woke up and out of nowhere you have this like sense of like grandeur of I can just literally beat the depression back with the power of my bare hands and my will.
Yeah.
After like days of just talking about it, and you went, oh shit. like we recognize what was going on, but things like that happen to you. And so, like anybody with bipolar, I think just like being able to roll with the punches a little bit is
Yeah,
probably beneficial.
for sure. Yeah, that was a very interesting time. And another one of those cases where like the brain, uh, the one part of your brain that like just like is illogical and like just is super loud, kind of overcrowds the logic part of your brain, and that yeah, I mean that it's frustrating and annoying when it happens, especially when you have the hindsight of looking back and be like, well, duh, why didn't I just do this instead? And it's like, my life, I feel like, has been full of those where you're just like, I make a decision thinking that it's like correct, but I was in the wrong mind frame to even consider that to be logical or correct.
Yeah, I think the bipolar voice, like the good feeling mania voice, is almost like a siren's call. It's
Hmm.
really good at convincing you that you're in a great space and it's going to be different this time, and you've really got it going on, and you've like unlocked the code basically to what's wrong with your life.
Yeah.
And it just sounds so real. It just sounds like your own voice in your own head, and you believe it.
Hmm.
I'd say too, in hindsight, our first meeting, because we are long distance, is hilariously the most bipolar thing I can possibly imagine. I flew you out to New York.
Oh
You're in
yeah.
North Carolina, and I'm from like Toronto. I was flying in to do an inauguration cruise. Basically, my mother works for a travel agency, and while I was there, after spending like the night basically on the cruise, I had booked a hotel to meet you while I was in New York.
Yeah.
And I paid you paid me back later, but I paid for your flight at the time to fly you in last minute for like one night only.
Hmm.
Like less than 24 hours. It was like 20 hours.
Something like that. Yeah.
And it was like the most hedonistic 20 hours of my life.
Yeah.
And we had a great time with each other, and it really felt like the cosmos like aligned, and that it was just like the best time ever. Not that I don't think that you and I are a good match. I just, I think in hindsight, it's very much we were both manic
Yeah.
or hypomanic, I should say. But yeah, fun stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's crazy. It's something that's very common as well, in terms of like being bipolar, to the point where some people would actively decline or against using medications because they love the high of it so much, and a lot of times medications kind of dull it out, so you don't feel that like hypomania high. Um, and it's like, I mean, people want their cake and eat it too at the same time when it comes to like the medication part. But it's so important to take your medications, people. Like, don't think you're smarter than the doctors and stop taking it because you feel better. Like,
I
listen
get
to
it. Like hypomania without agitation literally feels like I'm on drugs. It feels
yeah,
like I'm just on drugs and I'm invincible. So like a lot of people like that feeling. Obviously, people like drugs.
yes,
But I think like it's so not worth the agitation and the inconsistencies you're probably giving the people around you, and it's really hard to manage the really really low dips in mood.
hmm,
I would say like I went on medication like last week basically. That's when I started. But I react to everything really really quickly. Within like I think the first day of taking this, you and I both knew this was a hypomanic episode.
yeah,
That was starting, and I was like, oh god, strap in.
hmm,
And hope that it would pass, but it really didn't. But I was in a really, really depressive episode at the time. I was basically the lowest I'd been in probably like a year or two. And like it was just time to reach out and ask for some help. It was time. So tried meds again, and I have a really long history of either them not working or being like deadly allergic to every medication to do with mental health. It's so unfortunate.
yeah,
Um, and I got this med, and I like within 24 hours from me, I went from like wanting to just disappear and die to like being really excited about like my future and wanting to like work out, and everything was great.
hmm,
And that roller coaster of that low to the high, and now I'm kind of on the getting back down to like a low neutral right now, is exhausting.
yeah.
when the mania ends and you like hit back like to normal, it's like a crash landing.
Yes.
Like my brain and my body both got hit by trucks, but like individually.
Hmm. Hmm.
What's it like for you when you crash down?
For me, when I crash down, uh, it's like this overwhelming depressive feeling. It's just like, I mean, at my worst, I had like suicidal ideations and things like that. And you just like feel completely and utterly powerless in your world. And you just like want nothing to do but just like let go and just not care. So it's like, it's definitely a crash emotionally. I fully agree with the idea of like an airplane just kind of like crashing out of the sky and just like there's no landing or whatever. It's just kind of a destructive mess.
Screw the airplane. It's like I'm one of those satellites that Elon Musk put in the sky, and I'm just like disintegrating on my way through the atmosphere. And like when I finally hit the ground, it's like, you know
Yeah,
what I mean?
absolutely.
Completely burnt out.
And I mean, the idea like your brain is burning like so many calories to like keep up that hypomania. You just in a lot of times people go for food because of that. Like you're just like I'm hungry because like I'm working at 100% all the time, like through the night, and like my brain is still on. And, like that leads to like bad issues with insomnia and things like that. So
I was so hungry. I ate so much food, and I lost like 2-ish pounds in
mhm.
the last week. It was absolute madness.
Yeah, I mean, there was a an article that was done in regards to like chess players. When chess players use their brain like entirely for like a week, they find that these guys lose a bunch of weight like after tournaments because of the fact that their brains are being used like so like enormously. And it's not too different from like being bipolar and having your brain on all the time and like wanting to eat food in order to maintain this. Because I mean, of course, it's not sustainable nor is it safe to be in those hypomanic episodes, but I think it's really relevant that like people go for food when it comes to being, and that just hurts the crash even more.
If I'm remembering the actual wow, cut that out. If I can remember the journal article in question, wow, cannot talk today. Probably gonna leave that in as bloopers because lupus is great and well and alive in my life.
Yes.
um, I okay, journal article in question. Learned about this in school years ago. Doesn't matter, still relevant. I'm pretty sure you burn like hundreds, if not like thousands of calories, like in a quick, like an instant, basically. Like the calories per minute in like a 30-second decision for chess is like hundreds of calories.
Yes.
It's
Absolutely.
just like because you like expert chess players can think so many moves ahead. It is literally just like I don't know, like human computering, like probability and like what you want to do. It's like it's madness.
Yes.
And yeah, there's just so many calories. And you're totally right. Obviously, we're not burning the same kind of calories as like chess players going for like in a couple hours or for like a week, but it definitely feels really similar.
Hmm.
Okay, so you and me have had our fair share of issues in this relationship. What do you feel like of all the tips and tricks and tools we got from our therapy, from like what is it? The 7 principles of marriage, all the other exercises we've done. What have been your favorite for this relationship, basically?
Favorite for this relationship. Okay. Um, yeah, I would say Gottman's Seven Principles. I think were was a really kind of eye opening. This is another. It's like a pamphlet almost, but it's like a
It's not
small.
a pamphlet. I just have the PDF. It's like a
It's
proper book. If you're looking to buy, you can buy
it's
paperback and hardcover.
yeah. It's a, okay. Proper book. It's it's been phenomenal in terms of being able to connect with your partner while you're like having a fight. We've very frequently used some of the exercises when we're really feeling like we're at each other's throats and taking the time to like kind of step back and go over like what you're grateful for in terms of the relationship has been a huge help with like kind of reminding you and keeping you grounded, especially if you're hypomanic.
I found hilariously, because we started using the book when you were hypomanic, that I found myself frequently asking you for 3 things. One of the exercises is 3 things that you like really like and value and like are grateful for in your partner, basically. And they give you a list of things, but we've sort of evolved to just sort of saying what comes to mind.
Hmm.
And then you explain it. So it's not just like, I like that you're loyal. It's like, okay, I like that you're loyal. And you give like a good example or a story about your partner being loyal in a way that means a lot to you and is meaningful.
Yes.
And you do that with three different things. But I used to ask you to do that a lot when you were hypomanic. And recently, when had a very, very bad fight. And I could realize, even though I wasn't quite remorseful about it, that I had hurt you a lot. And I extended to you, like, is there something that you need from me? Like, what can I do for you in this moment? And you very timidly asked for
Hmm.
the three things you like. And I felt like a horrible human being
Yeah.
to like realize that, you know, you were asking for like one of the coping bonding exercises, but we did it, and I think it helped a lot. It also diffused the situation a lot.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Um, my other favorite exercise, although not useful for couples and stuff, was the desert island exercise. Because you're such a strategist and you love strategy games and like survival games and the Total War series, that
Hmm.
like the exercise is basically like two laymen's get together, and out of a series of objects you pick what you want to be on a desert island. And you were like, well, we can't do this because we can do this, and this does this and this, and we don't need that. And you took over in like a hilarious way. You were like Captain Slam, like, you're gonna do it, we're gonna be fine.
Yeah. For sure.
But I did find the using it as an opportunity to kind of share power and share ideas and share just like technique in general was really valuable. So there are some fun ones, even though a lot of those exercises can be a little bit painful to do.
Yeah.
Also, the like, how well do you know your partner is oddly interesting too.
Hmm.
We have an exercise. There's an exercise in there where you rate yourself or rate the relationship on a series of measures, and then you compare.
Hmm.
I think a bit of that can be a little bit heartbreaking, but also really good information, like solid data.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that we do together that you find very useful? Or maybe something that I do that you like really value that you think is good for like you being bipolar, or maybe just like relationship in general?
We had touched upon this a little bit, but I would say like going for like the 10-minute breaks and just like drinking some water, getting yourself out of like the position that you're in, like just kind of changing scenery, even if it's so much as like kind of taking a walk outside, has been a huge help. Like just trying to reset where you're at from a like a mind framework. And you just kind of you start like because if you're in the room that you are like that you were agitated in, you're probably going to stay in that sort of like agitated state. But if you leave and you get food and you like sit down like in a dining room table, it's a very different mindset that takes place. And so like just even going out for a walk in the sun helps a tremendous amount, right? So those sorts of like those sorts of things are very important to do, and giving yourself time to do those things is very helpful, especially if like you find yourself like getting into a fight with your significant other, regardless of what the topic is that you are fighting over.
Yeah, I mean, we are primarily long distance, but we've obviously had like what, like more than half a dozen trips at this point. We've had 7 trips.
Something like that. Yes.
And when you were here for the 2 weeks, because the majority of our trips have been like 2 week stints with each other. When you're here for 2 weeks, or when I was there with you in the States for 2 weeks, it was kind of interesting to see us like in the beginning, we didn't have those techniques and we didn't fare quite as well.
Mm-hmm.
Almost like tried to force ourselves to be okay. And I distinctly remember being so mad at you while you were here that I was like, I don't want to talk to you for 10 minutes. And I very stubbornly sat up on my bed and crossed my arms and did my own thing on my phone. And you turned around and did your own thing in your computer, and we came back and just stuff was fine.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even if you just can't leave the room, like really disconnecting from each other to just calm down for 5 or 10 minutes is fine. And in the moment you're so angry, I always find that I'm like, I don't need 10 minutes. 10 minutes isn't going to do anything. I am so angry right now. I need like an hour. And honestly, like 10 to 15 minutes almost every single time is enough time for me.
Yep.
And I am a hot headed person. And it works out.
Indeed.
I think too, we have been getting better at communicating. Like, do you want comfort or do you want solutions?
Yes.
Like, sometimes, like, or I think advocating too this idea of like, this isn't what I'm looking for, which has
Yes.
been very new for us. But if your partner's about to really lay into trying to do this thing for you and you're not really about it, I think you need to come up with an agreement with each other that you can say, hey, this isn't really what I'm asking for. This really isn't like what I'm looking for.
Right.
And I think you also need to have a good sense about it as the other partner to receive that criticism and go, okay, that's fine, which can be really hard to do
Yeah.
because it's like, I'm trying over here. The reality is, I think you need to get comfortable with each other and really like break down that sort of insecurity of you need to be able to ask for exactly what you want, and you also need to be open to critique to how you provide what they need.
Yeah.
And learning that between us has been a little bit difficult at times.
Mm-hmm.
I think too with like your bipolar diagnosis and my getting there and then my lupus diagnosis with all the rest, I think like learning what we actually need from each other has changed a lot over the
Absolutely.
last little bit of time. Like what I needed from you 3 years ago is not what I generally need from you now.
Yes. Yes.
Growing together.
With all the growing pains, especially as two people with like the illnesses that we have.
Yeah, a lot of growing pains. I think I think you have to be really willing if you're going to date somebody else with mental illness, if you have mental illness, you have to really be willing to come to the table like every single day and really be willing to take critique and actually put effort into fixing it. It's not enough for your partner to say that they're sorry. It's not enough for your partner to say, like, yeah, I just had an episode. I just had a whatever. Like, both of us have been to therapy individually. Both of us have tried to fix medications well. And when I couldn't get meds to work, I had my own therapist I saw literally every single week. And I did workbooks on the side. And I was attempting to do like as much exercise as I could and journaling and all the rest of it, just anything I could that went beyond medication.
Right.
um, Even like CBD I was doing for a little while to try to like fix some stuff. um, yeah, I think you need to be committed to fixing your partner. Like I told you about your mood cycling and like you got a therapist, you went to your doctor, like you did the thing.
Yeah.
Like mental illness is not an excuse for your partner to be abusive towards you emotionally.
Absolutely. I mean, you can only like tolerate so much before like it's not really your problem anymore, you know. So we've definitely had our fights where um, one person's hypomanic and the other person's not, and it's like you're trying to contain like a raging fire with like a little squirt gun of water, and yeah, um, finding the tools, working together, and coming together for a lot of these probably more difficult times is really really important. And I'm incredibly blessed and grateful to have you in my life to help me be like grounded in this crazy world that we live in.
Babe, so cute. I'm super grateful for you too. I just I'm not gonna get super mushy on the podcast because I'm like, who wants to hear this? But no, I grateful for a partner that's been brave enough to grow with me and been strong enough to take critique and sometimes like the hardest moments to take it. And grateful that whenever I've really the cat's eating. I'm sorry if you can hear that. And in like in the hardest moments to take critique, really sit down and take it and do work, not just say I'm sorry and like not just get defensive, but say like I hear you and come to the game, basically like come to play.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
not that
Very
it's always
important.
been perfect. I think we've definitely had moments where like one person or the other was sort of more on the like lazy, I'm dissociating, I'm super depressed, I just don't want to do anything. And I don't think you should tolerate that either in a relationship, but I think you should have a conversation, like your come to Jesus conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, also like someone's mental illness should not be a reason for you to stay.
Hmm.
I think we've had that conversation a few times, and like
Yes,
at the end of the day, like you can't like hold someone's hand forever if you don't feel like you're getting satisfied in that relationship at all.
absolutely.
So nah, I don't know. Do you have any like thoughts about that or no?
Um, yeah, it's about what your level of tolerance is. Like, it's definitely a give and take, and that's true with every relationship, even normative ones, right? So, I ours is a
It's fun.
It's fun. It's chaotic. I'll say that. There's a lot of chaos with it. I mean, that just comes with like the cycling. It's like, yeah.
Learning to ride the waves instead of fight against them, I think, which is like a lot of communication and a lot of like again like you being able to communicate to me that you think you're getting hypomanic, or me being able to tell you, hey, you're doing XYZ. Do you think maybe you might be like in a bit of a hypomanic episode? I think that's really important, like to the relationship to survive.
Absolutely.
Especially with depressive episodes too, like knowing when to reach out to your partner, and as a partner knowing how to intervene is really important.
Hmm. Yeah. It's a partner is probably one of the best in terms of like examples of people who would be looking out for your well-being. Like, try, like, hopefully, like, I mean, especially in this day and age, like, it's super easy to like fall into like a depressive episode and like lose contact with people, but it's so important to like still talk to people and be social and things like that. And I recognize, like, with the pandemic, it's a lot more difficult now to have like face-to-face conversations, but at the very least, like, talk to someone. Talk, whether it be like your therapist or whether it be like your neighbor or even your best friend. Like, it's important to like keep things consistent and keep your social outings like keep your social outings in general, in order to
I
like.
have to be careful with that with hypomania because like
Oh,
over
yeah,
sociality.
you don't want to be over. Yeah, you don't want to be
I
over
think I know what you're
social.
trying to say. I think what you're trying to say is essentially like make sure you keep contact with people, like have a support network. I think is
Yes.
like the short of the long of what you're trying to say. And on that note of have a support network, I think it's really important that you have people outside of your significant other, especially if you're in a relationship where you're not neurotypical.
Hmm.
Whether your partner has ADHD or autism or your partner has bipolar or like doesn't matter. If you are in a relation, and I think regular relationships too, but especially in neurotypical because they are just so much more like cumbersome and stressful,
Yeah.
you've got to have a best friend. You've got to have people in your life that you can talk to. I don't care if your best friend is your friend's parents, like they're your friend's dad, or like your best friend from school or from whatever. You need to have someone that you can go to and be like, I just need to go off about how my partner really annoys me, and like really have a safe space to do that so that you
Yeah.
can then take their advice or their opinions or just feel calmer and come back to the relationship.
Yeah.
Because you can't just have one person be solely responsible for your mental health and
Right.
like as your safe space because they're also dealing with their own thing. We
Yeah.
don't typically cycle at the same times. Thank God.
Yeah.
um, but I like if I'm in a really bad spot and you're just not able to give me what I need, there's other people I call.
Yeah.
Like I would call like one of my two best friends who I can talk to for literally 8 minutes. She takes my call at work because I am so loved and I can feel better and come back to you, and then I can better articulate to you what I need from you.
Yeah.
But I think like acknowledging like mental illness and like couple dynamics are just a lot more complicated. And it's not for like the faint of heart. Like this isn't like an easy relationship, but I think it's a good relationship, and I think a relationship is as good as the effort you're both willing to put into it.
Absolutely.
And like to the amount in which you were both able to be empathetic and loving towards each other and like about each other. But yeah,
Yeah.
support networks. Have one. Don't
Please.
let your significant other be your support network.
Well, the soul support network.
Yes, yes, yes. Because you were first relationship. I would say she was your sole support network, and that didn't end well.
No, it did
And
not.
my previous long term relationship was definitely my sole support network, and that went atrociously. But live and learn.
Yes, indeed.
Well, thank you for being here and talking about this with me. And hopefully, this was interesting to somebody else, or maybe you're part of a couple of with somebody or are somebody in a relationship with regards to bipolar or mental illness. And hopefully, this was helpful. So, thanks for tuning in, Spoonies. Talk to you again soon.